speak with Keith Prince, Conservative Party Assembly member and also their spokesperson at City Hall in London, and Russell Warfield, Head of Communications at Possible, the climate change charity. Good afternoon to you both. I mean, Russell, first of all, what Ollie said at the end of his report there, and there does seem to be wide support on this specific point, that any potential benefits, and there are people who argue there are none, but I mean, let's suggest there are some, are so negligible that it just simply would never warrant a multi-hundreds of £million worth of scheme like this and a charge on some of the poorest people. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, thanks for having me on. Well, the toxic air that we're breathing at the moment all across London is a public health emergency at this point, right? And that counts in outer London as much as inner London, because there isn't a single borough in the city of London which satisfies the World Health Organization's standards for clean air. It's not the case that this is a problem that's confined to inner London. It is something that affects all Londoners, so it's right to expand it to the boundary of London. In terms of its effectiveness, I mean, like this isn't just coming in brand new. We've already got ULEZ up to the North and South Circular, and we've got a whole host of data about it. We've seen that it's slashed the emissions that we're making our air so filthy. Not just in inner London, as you mentioned in your package, loads of clean air zones all across the UK now. And all the data that's coming out of them is showing that the filthy air that we're having is nosediving.
But of course, it's not just... but air pollution, of course, is about so much more than cars. I mean, cars in the grander scale aren't even the biggest culprit. And, we have industry, there's domestic pollution. I know you're familiar with all of this, Russell. And in addition to that, big old busy airports that do more damage in one flight than about 600 cars do. So there's some confusion about, matey driving his Ford Fiesta or no longer driving it, what kind of effect it has and how much of an impact that's really going to have on the nation's health.
Well, look, you're not going to get any argument from me about finding other ways to clear up the air too, especially in terms of airports. I live quite near Heathrow. I'm firmly against the Heathrow expansion to a third runway. But the case is that about half of the source of about half the toxic air we're breathing in cities like London is coming from road traffic at the moment. So I think it's a pretty good place to start, to be honest, especially when we can think of viable alternatives to people getting around. We can invest in public transport that's cheaper, faster, more reliable, can get people walking and wheeling and cycling a bit more. And that seems a really, really good place to start. It doesn't make sense to me to say that just because there are other sources of air pollution, you wouldn't tackle any of the other sources.
But we have... London in the grander scale, I know it's not a race to the bottom, but in the grander scale of global cities, London doesn't do too badly. It looks nothing like it did 10 years ago. Air is getting cleaner all the time. Give it a couple of years and those cars that are earmarked as being the problem will probably no longer exist. So it seems to be a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a bit of a walnut on this one.
Well, the first thing I'd say is I'm a parent that lives in this expanded ULEZ zone, and I don't live in any of those cities, so I'm very thankful to be getting that extra protection that's going to be afforded to me.
But nothing's going to happen to you. If you've got kids or elderly parents or whatever that are vulnerable, then there's always going to be a concern about air pollution, even if you took every single car off the road. The average person is just simply not going to be touched by this, and even those that are, the effects are likely to be more damning from other components rather than cars.
Well, that's simply not the case, really. I mean, like, if you...
Well, what's the proof that it's not the case?
Because if you lessen the toxic air that we're all breathing, you're going to have greater health outcomes, aren't you?
But in life, it's a bit like you might get a side effect from taking an aspirin, but there's a trade-off, right? Between social mobility, people going about their business, the economy running, people being able to socialise and get around, and all that follows. Obviously, if you stuck your lips around the exhaust pipe of a car, it wouldn't do you any good. We know that, but we tend not to do that. And we have that trade-off knowing that, there's toxins in the air. That's part and parcel of living on planet Earth, right?
Obviously, there's a balance to be struck, but I don't think we're anywhere near it. I mean, like, the health outcomes we've got at the moment are just linked to a whole host of preventable and avoidable conditions, including premature death. So I think we can think a bit more imaginatively than sticking with the status quo where we are now, which everyone agrees, by the way, basically any polling that you look at, is that there's too much traffic in London. You can't get around.
Well, that bit is true enough. I think we'd all concur with that. Keith Prince, Assembly member and the Conservative Party spokesman on transport. Afternoon to you, Keith. I mean, Russell was just making the not unreasonable point that who doesn't want cleaner air?
We all want cleaner air. It's just how we go about it. I mean, let's make no mistake. This has got nothing to do with cleaning up London's air. This is all about raising money for Sadiq Khan and for TfL. We know from the Jacobs report that the effect that this will have on outer London boroughs is negligible. That's the words that they used in their report, which was commissioned by Sadiq Khan himself. This is just about money.
Just about money. Russell? It's just the cash. 224 million quid last year. It's a lot of money.
It sounds like a good idea to reinvest all that money in public transport to get people getting around in different and greener ways. So I think that, like, if you look at the effects that you're going to be having in outer London, of course you're going to have a slightly diminishing return because it is less densely populated. But the fact is that average has taken over a really, really wide area. And the biggest effects are going to be on the most congested central roads, where a lot of people live. And they're going to be really, really protected by having the dirtiest cars taken off the road sooner than they would have been.
And on that point, Keith, I mean, look, it's not perfect, but if it means fewer cars and fewer toxins, then whatever the grumbles of the £12.50 and the fact that TfL make 224 million quid, that if it works a bit, that's better than nothing at all.
Not really, because there are far bigger, more pressing areas. I mean, let's look at London Underground. That's 30 times more polluting than anywhere out in outer London. Let's look at the damage this is doing to people. OK, so if you're rich, you can pollute. Is that the way it is nowadays? Because there are lots of people in my constituency, in Havering and Redbridge, that are going to be absolutely crucified by this. My colleague's son has had to sell his car, and because of the ULEZ, the car was virtually worthless. I've got a charity. We could go out of business because of this, because we've got to find £7,000 from somewhere. It's a homeless charity in Havering. Got to find £7,000 to retrofit the van, and we're getting no help from the mayor whatsoever. This is completely wrong. This is the wrong time. Everybody has said it's the wrong time. Even Keir Starmer has said this is the wrong time to make this happen. But if you're rich, that's fine. You can do it. I cannot believe that a socialist has decided to punish those people least able to afford this, and for negligible effects. I think it's morally wrong.
And there it is, Russell. That is the contention of many people, that this is a massive scheme. It's an expensive scheme. It unfairly hits the poorest, some of the most vulnerable people who need to get around, and charities and the self-employed and those that just want to go from A to B. That, you know, a politician has decreed you cannot cross that road in your car without giving me £12 fare. We don't care if you pollute it, by the way, but give us your money first. Pollute all you like. All because of a statistical construct that suggests the most vulnerable might live an extra 20 hours.
Well, we've got this scheme in place all across the inner and central London anyway, and as you say, in zones all across the UK. If it were the case that people were just handing over money and there was no impact on the health outcomes and the air quality in these cities, we wouldn't persist in doing it. We do it because it works. There's a track record. It goes back to Ken Livingstone's congestion charge. Who's complaining about that now? We've all seen the benefit. We all agree it's a good thing. And I'm not aware of any serious political actor who is proposing to overturn that. Not many people want to go back from the inner London one either.
The congestion charge, which, I mean, clearly hasn't worked at all, because it's still chaos, but you could at least kind of, in your head, you could understand the notion of it. You know, this is meant to reduce people coming in, and that's a good idea if it works, but it didn't really work, and yet they're still trousering the cash.
Well, it did have an effect. I mean, imagine if you didn't have it in place at all. I mean, I'm not arguing that any of these things are just going to make all these problems go away overnight. We need to go further and faster, but you need to go in the right direction. And that's what today is all about. We're getting a bit of extra protection from the really, really dangerous levels of air pollution we're all breathing at the moment. And I think that's a really, really wonderful thing.
Keith, it's a really wonderful thing. What's not to like?
Well, what is there to like? Well, I'll tell you a wonderful thing. If people of London support Susan Hall, our mayoral candidate, in May next year, this will be stopped. Day one, she will reverse this. And even the mayor doesn't agree with your guess, because when I asked him in May 2021, did he plan to expand the ULEZ to outer London, he said, no, I've no plans, because it isn't the way to do it. He said that what we need are targeted measures, and the idea of doing the whole of outer London wouldn't work. That's his words, not mine. So I'm sorry, I don't agree with your guess. This is not the answer. This is just about raising cash.
Will she reverse all of it, or just the extension?
She will reverse the expansion.
But well, surely if she doesn't, I mean, you'd reverse all of it, wouldn't you, if you were consistent with the idea that it doesn't work? So she believes it works.
No, it doesn't work in outer London. All the research shows it wouldn't.
So it does work. You think it does reduce pollution in inner London?
There's no question that certainly in the central area it has had an effect on pollution, and we supported that. It was Boris Johnson's idea at the end of the day. So we supported the ULEZ in inner London because it worked. But we do not support it in outer London because it doesn't.
Keith is really illustrating the key point I'm making here, which is that when you bring these sort of measures in, very quickly, people don't want to go back to the way they were. You're completely right about that, Ian, when you say that consistently it would make sense to scrap it all if you don't accept the premise of it. You're going to find that today is going to be the turning point in public opinion on this. People will feel the benefits. People will realise it's not a great an imposition to their lives as they thought it was going to be, and we're just going to get on with this being the new normal, and we're going to keep going further to clean up our air and tackle the traffic that's clogging up our cities.
There it is. Thank you, Russell Warfield. He's Head of Communications at Possible, the climate change charity, and Keith Prince, the Assembly member for the Conservative Party and transport spokesperson for them as well.